We think whatever they want us to think.
Whatever the media wants to spotlight, that's what you believe is the issue to care about.
Uber driver was killed by two young girls, and the news didn't even pick that one up at all.
Responses of groups of people that will come in and pretend to have independent thought, but they really just throw these talking points.
They continue to say it's a threat to our democracy, a threat to our democracy. What they were saying was a threat to the democracy was having these alternative news sources, but it's really a threat to their grip of totalitarianism.
Democracy has a lot of room for tyranny. Just because you convince a lot of people of something doesn't mean that it's true, right, fair, or the thing to do.
It brings us to a recent video clip that came out. And it was head of the CDC, and she was on CNN, right? And she was talking about how there's a very small window for the government to act to get people to basically force people into vaccines before they get their freedom back from the states opening up. And she was warning that if the states open up before they've forced people to get this, then why would anybody get it once they've already had their freedoms back? That was her quote. Well, I don't want to say it was her quote. I'm paraphrasing what she said. You saw that, right? Actually, I think I saw you posted it.
I did, yes. So emergency powers given to the government, they never relinquish that back to us. I mean, think about the privacy violations that we still have from the Patriot Act after 9/11. We never got those back. So emergency powers, we're giving the state government to make these decisions for us and instituting things like the vaccine passports. That's all pretty scary stuff. We shouldn't ever give government that, because they'll just create new crisis so that we empower them some more. So I think that video was just a peek into the true motives, that it's about gaining influence over people and to box people in to do things like support the commercialization of the vaccine industry that's, I'm sure, made a lot of money this year.
Yeah. I mean, and as opposed to letting good ideas win out, right? I like to talk about everybody, especially like the academics and the policymakers, they make everything so complex. And I think they make it so complex so the average person doesn't understand it. And then they're like, well, I don't understand, so I'll just default to you. You just tell me what it is. But I think that we can break everything down to its most basic, and we can understand it there. And so when you look at communism and fascism and socialism and capitalism and all these isms and what are they? And then people get caught up in words and this and that. And I like to think of it like this, simple. There's two systems. One system that's closed, captured, controlled, like a centrally planned system. And then one that's free, open, and competitive, right?
Yes.
But they directly contrast each other, because if it's competitive, the best ideas are always going to win. You don't have to force me. I'm going to choose the best option, versus over here, we have to tell you what to do. And so I think rather than get caught up in words, I mean, when you look at it through that lens, and then you look at a policy, or I should say, like this video clip that was exposed, or I shouldn't even say exposed, it was on CNN. But I mean, it's pretty evident exactly which camp we're in.
Let's have her back on, because she's the only one on CNN that's told the truth in at least the last calendar year.
Yeah, right. We need more of that. I just can't believe that more people aren't outraged at what she's saying.
Yeah, I was surprised too. There was, I guess that video is at least 3 weeks old, and it didn't get any kind of popularity, or at least go viral, until the, I guess, right side of the aisle got a hold of it, because we don't watch CNN typically. So
yeah,
the outrage did come, and then I saw that she posted it again yesterday to make some rebuttal about why she said what she said. But I got a lot of engagement on that post. I think people are pretty much beginning to see that it's about the commercialization of vaccines and about forced compliance. And I wasn't expecting anybody to confirm what I had suspected for a year.
Yeah. And then when you take that a step further, so we have this centrally planned model. I tweeted out, I think yesterday, that the more the planners, the Federal Reserve, the government, and the central planners try to fix inequality, the more unequal they actually become. And the reason why is because what they're trying to do is they're trying to prioritize equality of an outcome versus equality of an opportunity. And when you try to plan for equality of an outcome, then you have to treat different groups differently, right? Oh, this group has too much, so let's take some away from them to give to this group that doesn't have enough. So that way it's more equal. But I just treated this group unequal to supposedly bring this group more equal, but I've treated them both unequally now.
Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty wild because you're going to make a whole new generation of people who've been artificially suppressed, and you'll just have to make it up to them in the future in a strange cycle. You know, we can't look at the past through the lens of today and think that we can fix things that were broken before. That you know, everything evolves in a direction that is progressive. It's just the speed with which we get there. But I don't know why we're expected to right the wrongs of people that didn't do those decisions, make those decisions.
It seems like everything's progressive. And I mean, on one hand, like we should be, I guess, progressing, but on the other hand, I think there's some things that should always remain the same. Maybe there's like some of each, right? Because like I said, right, you can make things like super complex, but at the end of the day, you have to break things down to the most basic. And those most basic things, first principles, they're always going to remain true. So we always have to stay conservative to those things while still trying to progress into others. I mean, do you see that?
That's why constitutional contextualists just are so upsetting to me, because how can you just through wordplay, you know, redefine what the documents mean that are in very much black and white language? I mean, we're a young country. It's not that old of a document when you think about all the societies of, you know, history.
Yeah. And, you know, I mean, the founding fathers that wrote that Constitution were super smart, way smarter than anybody
Yes,
today.
they saw human nature.
They saw human nature. I think, you know, back then they didn't have social media, right? So all they did was like read literature, and they learned a lot of literature. They learned a lot of history. Back then, like history was still kind of transferred from person to person, generation to generation. So they knew history, they knew literature, they were thinkers, right? They probably had lots of free time sitting on their porch thinking through this.
They also saw all the frustrations they had with the other, you know, the English government.
Yeah.
You know, and so you talk amongst each other about all the problems you have with it and what's unfair. And so then you have a head start on making a more perfect union, which I still believe they did.
Yeah. And it seemed like they were definitely acting in response to that government, but they, in my opinion, and per the work of and their own writing, I mean, they made the Constitution specifically to limit the power of the government. And so like the progressives want to say that, well, the Constitution's a living, breathing document and it needs to be updated. And it's like, no, they specifically said that it's meant to restrain them. It was meant to not grow and creep. But of course, that's not what they want.
Yeah, so I'm not for giving emergency powers to government to redefine things like what my rights are and the limitations that they have. And they're doing it with gun control. They're doing it with, you know, the lockdowns for COVID. Medical autonomy is on the chopping block. And then, of course, we know that next comes the climate change lockdowns.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I've tweeted about that. That's a scary subject. But before we jump into that scary one, you know, back to the medical autonomy is an interesting concept because, you know, that's something that's always been very private. I mean, we have like a whole HIPAA law that's regarding like your medical privacy. Mm-hmm. And under like, you know, ADA, Americans with Disabilities, for example, if I have a disability, like no one's even allowed to ask me what that disability is. Like, I have a little dog and she's like a registered like support animal. And like, we can take her to the beach. And then like the lifeguard's like, hey, you can't have your dog on the beach. Oh, she's a support animal. For what? You can't ask that. And like, they can't, right? Because there's like privacy around that. Mm-hmm. And typically also it's like one-on-one between me and my doctor.
Right.
And about 8 weeks ago, I had a little orthoscopic surgery on my hip. They had to clean it up a little bit, too much rough play for me. And my doctor's like, hey, here's your options. We can do this or we could do this. Here's the pros of this. Here's the cons of this based off of your health, your age, your activity level. Here's what you could be thinking. You could also think about this, right? And he threw all this out at me based off of me, right? And then let me choose what I thought was best for myself, right? And typically that's the way it would be. But now we're supposed to just like disregard all that. And I guess we're all in this together.
Well, and that's why it's all about forced compliance. I believe that how government is treating us and how businesses are treating us now is how they've always felt about us. Now they just have moral justification to, you know, be pretty wide open about what those feelings actually are. So I've watched a lot of businesses, in LA, we have the only patio dining. And they're not competing at all, trying to make that a good experience because they know that we have such fixed options. So you start watching the decline of the quality and the treatment and the tone that they're using. And I know they're in a tough position, but there's no market competition for us anymore because our options are so limited. I also saw that airline, back to the support animals. I saw that there were some airlines that yanked your ability to take your support animal on a flight. Yep. I thought that was interesting, but that definitely indicates that all along they were pretty annoyed with the fact that we were doing that.
Yeah. Yeah, to that point, I mean, and that's a great point and one that we can pivot into. I mean, you talked about that they have a lack of competition, the places in LA. And so because of the lack of competition, they don't have to try very hard, right? And I think that is back to the two systems, right? The captured, controlled, planned one versus the free, open, competitive. I always believe that competition, to the point you're making, competition always is going to produce better products, better services, and better prices, right? When businesses compete, the consumers win.
Yes.
But likewise, when cities compete, people win. When states compete, people win. And even
politicians too.
Imagine a world where countries compete for us as citizens.
It's pretty beautiful.